If ever I'm asked which is the most reliable driver in golf, I've always tended to say Ping, but is that going to be the case for the new G430? Let's find out. Oh, that's good. Felt long as well. So it's that time of year and Ping have brought out their new line of drivers, the G430, which is taking over from the G425. So before we head out on the golf course and get an initial test of them, let's just run through a little bit of the technology that has maybe changed from the previous models to these current models. So in the lineup, there are currently 3 drivers still, like we saw from the 425 range. I've tested 2 of them. The third one is the SFT, which is the straight flight technology, which is probably aimed a little bit more at the higher handicapper, looked at maybe trying to eradicate that slice a little bit more. And the one big change that comes from the SFT driver from the previous model of the 425 is that it has a movable weight now in the back section. Previously in the 425, we saw that it was in a fixed location, slightly heel orientated to help try and get that little bit more draw. They've now got an extra position which is even closer to the heel to try and give you that even more draw. So if you're someone who's really trying to get that draw or really trying to get rid of that slice, the SFT is probably going to be the one that you would want to go down. So one of the things that Ping are talking about is more distance, which, to be fair, we don't really normally hear Ping bang on about getting more distance, but what they're talking about is more consistent distance. So on your off-centered hits, they're trying to see that you're still going to get up close to where you get from a good hit. And how they've done that? Well, they've changed the face of the driver a little bit. So a couple of things that have happened with the club face on the 425 line now. They've made it ever so slightly shallower, and they've also made the forged VFT face ever so slightly thinner. 6% thinner is what they've done with this face here. It means that it's able to deliver more face flexing. So on those points where you don't quite get it out of the center, we're seeing that it's still able to produce those higher ball speeds. One of the other things that they've talked about and coined the phrase of is spin-sistency. Hard enough to say, but what that means is basically there's less loft on the lower parts of the face, so we're seeing that you're going to get a higher smash factor if you have less loft. If you have more loft, you get almost like a bit of a glancing blow. So having less loft on the bottom of the face and then also having variable roll and bulge across the face means, again, on your off-centered hits, you're still going to see good distance numbers. One of the other factors that have changed inside the driver is actually the sound of the driver when you're hitting it. One of the complaints from last year and previous models was that it did sound a little bit too high pitched. It sounded a little tingy when you were hitting these drivers. So what they've done by positioning what they call the ribs inside of here, they've been able to change them so they take more vibration and they actually take out that tinginess sound. So actually the frequency of the hit comes down, which may not matter to a lot of people, but for me personally, when I hit a driver, I like to hear more of a sort of solid old school hit. I don't want to hear that loud tingy noise, so it'll be interesting to see what it does sound like when we are hitting it. So exclusive to the LST version, they have what they call the carbon fly wrap, which is a piece of carbon now that sits on top of the crown. So what this means with having the carbon fly wrap, it means that they can get a lower CG, position the CG lower in the club, and also produce lower spin due to weight saving. It doesn't come in the 430 Max and it doesn't come in the 430 SFT. It's only coming in the LST model. So it's evident when you actually put the club in behind the golf ball that you can see that it is there in the LST. It goes from heel to toe and wraps the crown of the driver, and it almost looks like a bit of a cutaway section, and then this carbon's been placed in on top. And compared to the Max versus the LST, for me, I think it actually looks a little better. It almost looks like it frames it, but you can tell that there is carbon in there as opposed to what you don't see having no carbon in the Max or the SFT. One of the things that we do see that has remained in the Max and the LST version is the movable weight track at the back. So you do have a fade setting, you have a draw setting, and you also have that neutral setting. So now we know what the G430 lineup has to offer. It's time to head out onto the golf course and also down to the driving range and give myself an initial hit of these drivers. I want to know, are they still as reliable straight into the hands? Am I going to be hitting it straight? Am I going to be achieving this little bit more distance? And is it that ping that I have had in my mind for the past 4 or 5 years that if you go and pick one up, it's just going to be easy to use? Oh, that was pure. You take those as a strike pattern. Oh, that is just straight. So now we've had our initial hit down at the driving range and out on the golf course. A couple of things that I want to talk to you about. Number one, the looks of the driver. For me personally, I prefer the LST model. Having that classic tall look about it and that little bit more of a compact head, that just looks a little bit more appealing to me. And even with the carbon fly wrap that they have there, I think it just frames the driver better. When I had that in behind the golf ball, it definitely just looked that little bit more appealing to me. That being said, the Max definitely inspires a lot of confidence. As soon as I put it down at the driving range on my first hit, I just thought, I'm going to hit this straight. It looks forgiving, it looks easy to use. And even the face only being 0.1 of an inch slightly shallower, it does actually look a little bit shallower. And when you put it in behind the golf ball, I thought to myself, I'm not going to have a problem actually launching this up in the air. And as we went on to hitting it, I was definitely seeing that from both drivers, especially the Max. If I heeled it, if I towed it, good strikes, it definitely just felt like it was climbing up into the air quicker and you got that desired flight that you want. From the LST version, again, was pretty easy to actually get it launching up there. I did notice when I was down at the driving range, I had it set in the neutral position and I was seeing a little bit more fade than I wanted to, probably because it is a low spin version. I wasn't maybe getting enough backspin and I was just getting a little bit too much side spin and it was just curving off to the right hand side. But even on slightly off-centre hits towards the heel, a little bit towards the toe, I didn't feel like I was losing loads of distance. It didn't feel like it was dropping out of the sky. And then when I went actually out onto the golf course, pretty much followed on from there. I moved the weight into the heel for the LST model, and I definitely found that that sort of straightened the flight up when I was just initially trying it without seeing any data out on the golf course. In terms of forgiveness and performance out there, again, both looking great behind the golf ball. Definitely the Max inspiring that little bit more confidence and that little bit more air of forgiveness. But flight-wise, I was seeing that both did the job, both launching. I felt like the LST was a little bit longer on some of them that I just clipped. It felt like they just came off the face hot and that they were actually getting maybe 10, 15 yards longer. So my initial thoughts, a good looking driver. I definitely like this little air of lime green or yellow, whatever the colour is that they've put onto there. I know it's nothing completely out there or breathtaking, but I just think it just adds that tiny little bit more compared to the G425 when it was just black and silver. it just makes it sparkle a little bit more. It just has that tiny little bit more sex appeal to me as I look down on it. Performance-wise, the fairway finding, they're easy to hit, everything that I would expect from a G driver. But that being said, are they actually performing drastically different? Am I actually hitting the LST version longer, or is the max version right up there with the LST? Because if that's the case and we get some data and the max is right next to the LST, I'd probably just go for the max. There'd be no real point in actually forgoing a little bit of distance or forgiveness just because it was 1 or 2 yards different. So I hit some balls in my studio and I collated some data. One of the things that we're going to be doing on the reviews as well, whenever we test drivers, we will be using a Fujikura Ventus TR Blue in a 6X shaft. So whatever manufacturer it is, I will be using that shaft to make it as consistent as I can throughout my testing throughout the year. And also we're going to be running a little bit of a leaderboard with models that fit into the same category, so you can get an idea of how it stacks up against other drivers. These being one of the first that we review on the channel this year, these will be sitting comfortably atop of that leaderboard, and then as we go on we will add more models into those categories. Now, the big thing that surprised me when hitting balls in the studio and getting the data was the LST version, because as I was hitting it, after a couple of loose ones in the initial first few hits, as I got into my rhythm, it was remarkably straight. I mean, I was just finding the fairway, getting great numbers from it. It actually coming in at 297 yards of carry with a ball speed of 161 miles per hour and a spin rate of 1,850. But it was that straightness and that ease to hit. Normally an LST version or a low spin model, you would find that they're a little bit of a caged animal. If you don't quite get them, they could be a little bit crooked on their flight, but it just seemed to go straight. It was just easy to hit. I got more and more confidence as I hit it, and I was seeing some big numbers. I think one of them totally went out to 335 and carried about 312. So it seriously impressed me, the LST version, and I'm strongly considering putting that one in the bag. That being said, how did the max stack up? So with the max, it was interesting because I felt that I didn't hit that as well as I did the LST model. But even though I was getting the toe, even though I was getting the heel a little bit more and still finding the centre of the club face, it actually came in at 288 yards carry, so 9 yards less. Its ball speed was 159 miles per hour, and its spin was 2,110 RPMs. So we can see that it's just offering that little bit more backspin. It's offered a little less ball speed, probably because I was pattering the face a little bit more, but only 2 miles per hour, and 9 yards for how poor I felt I hit it. I don't think it's too bad. And you know what? Again, even though I felt like I wasn't hitting it that well, I was still finding the fairway very regularly. It was tight, there wasn't much shape on them, and the actual dispersion of both drivers was actually very, very close together. It's just that the LST model was just getting that extra distance and seeing that I was getting a bit more from it. So it's all well and good actually hitting them in the studio and getting those datas, but I wanted to go back out onto the golf course, into the real world, put myself under a little bit of scrutiny and try and hit them and test them out there. Am I going to see again that the LST is as straight? Is it going to be long, or when I get out onto the golf course, all of a sudden does it drop back? Does it not find the fairway and do a start steering it? So I headed to the 18th hole at Warrington, which I would say is a pretty tough driving hole with having out of bounds down the right, bunkers all down the right and trees down the left. And I wanted to hit 3 shots with each driver, see how many I would find the fairway and see what the distance was like with both of them. That's just going over the trap. Just inside the left trees. That's on the fairway. Ooh. that's down the middle but a bit skied. Slap bang in the middle. LST time. Down the middle, just right of the stake. God, that was long, considering I skied it. Exactly the same spot, down the middle. Same spot. Three out of three with each, but the tightest dispersion ever with that. So in the test, we see that the LST came out top trumps. 3 out of 3 on the fairway, as opposed to 2 out of 3 with the Max. Again, with the Max, I just didn't feel like I hit it as well, but even that being said, they were only slightly back from where the LST was, and they were still towards the fairway. The one that just missed right was more me. I actually pushed it a little bit more than anything. It was a good hit and was pretty much up neck and neck with the LST. It was just that it just found a little bit of rough. What has surprised me is the confidence that I have in that LST. It almost feels like the Max driver to me, that I can just stand there and know that it is going to hit the fairway, but I'm still getting the advantage of the low spin and getting that little bit more distance. So the G430 overall, I think, is a fantastic driver. What I think of the G430 and what I think of a Ping driver, it reminds me very much of a Volvo. You know what you're getting, you know it's reliable, it's going to look pretty decent from model to model. There might be a little bit of a change, but you're not expecting big fireworks. You just know it's going to perform. And I definitely think this G430 lineup has done that. The LST has come out on top to me, and I definitely think that I might be looking at putting that in the bag. But if you're looking for a driver that you know is going to produce some distance, you know is going to be reliable and easy to hit, definitely the G430 is worth having a look at. Guys, I hope you've enjoyed that review. I hope it's helped you pick a little bit of information out of it. I'll see you in more reviews very soon.